Okay, we are going to do a book review on the Jim Crow Routine. This book is by Stephen Berrey, Berrey. The full title of the book is Stephen A. Berrey, The Jim Crow Routine, Everyday Performances of Race, Civil Rights, and Segregation in Mississippi. Book was published in 2015. A good book can be used in different ways. The primary argument in the book is that moving away from the violence and intimidation and everything, he's pretty much trying to focus on the social behaviors and how Jim Crow functioned as a script. It was roles that was acted out on a stage. Blacks had their roles, whites had their roles, and surprisingly but accurately, it depicted how fluid white supremacy was or is. Instead of the generally taught perspective of white supremacy is white supremacy or violence, it showed different parts of how white supremacy had to adjust based on the actions of black people. Perfect example. Jim Crow was, allowed to run roughshod right out of slavery because the slaves were, the emancipated freedmen were so happy to not have the title of slave. Even though their situation did not change much, they went right into convict leasing, sharecropping, and peonage. And some of that wasn't even true peonage. It was just, hey, you owe me money, come work for me, I'll go sell you. So there wasn't much of a change during that time. So whites could maintain this dominion and control that they had during slavery anyway. They could still kill with impunity, whatever. But then after the World War and blacks came back after they had served, they had come back with a different attitude. They had fought for freedom, and there was a different attitude toward second-class citizenship, and white America had to adjust. Even with the black brute theory that we talked about in earlier videos, where they changed the depiction of blacks from an identity of the Sambo, of the Uncle Tom, of the Uncle Remus, Aunt Jemima, where they're happy singing, just tell me what to do, competent people. But then they changed it to this criminal black brute. He's going to rape, he's going to pillage, he's going to seek revenge, birth of a nation, that sort of thing. Once they made that change, that was another showing of white supremacy having to adjust their view. It wasn't the superior race anymore. They actually changed their view, and this is touched on in Berrey, that they made themselves the victim. They said, we have to incarcerate all of these blacks because they're robbing and they're stealing and they're doing all of these crimes that we said they were going to do. Well, W.B. Du Bois was one of the first to challenge and just outright say, well, these people were let go with no money, no property, no self-management skills. So rather than starve, yeah, they're going to steal. They're going to um, have crime. That's in which is the same dynamics today, and that's where if you go all the way to 1994 with Hillary Clinton talking about the super predators, same deal. But as he was so in more into the fluidity of white supremacy when the civil rights movement came in full force, you had whites depicting the black people that were in the South that followed the Jim Crow roles as good Negroes, and the freedom riders coming from the North encouraging the Southerners to vote and other things like that, stand up for themselves. Those were the bad Negroes. So they even align themselves with black people to a degree on a Southern commonality. The good Negroes in the South won't act like this. It's these bothersome Northern Negroes. Blacks having a yes, I like you, no, I don't type of role that they had to play in Jim Crow society. Uh, it was a it was a good reading, but it did lend itself to abuse as to where a person who wanted to defend the premises of the Jim Crow routine would use this book and say, well, it was more of a social thing. It was more of an interaction as opposed to the true terror and violence that was associated with it. There was truly a crime against humanity. But it focused for the intellectual to just focus on the interaction and the roles and expectations that were associated with the interaction and how these were allowed to change over time. So it was and this also focused on Mississippi between the years 1930 and 1960. So this was not a full South like Slavery by Another Name. This is more of a Mississippi focus, kind of like the Worse Than Slavery book about the Parchment Farm, the state prison that was written by Olinsky. His name, David Olinsky. Book you need to read as well. So it, again, in sum, the argument illustrates that either a sharing or taking of power by both races in the Jim Crow Mississippi South, basically around events of World War II, Emmett Till affected. That was pretty much the good Southern Negroes and the bothersome Northern Negroes. That's when that really started. And then obviously the civil rights movement. But the primary power in the shifting of these roles was not in the white people. It was in the black people actually going off script. That was something that was unique. It was when the black people came back from war and was like, can't do this no more. When Emmett Till really fired up the black nation. When the voting rights movements started. Sit-ins. It was always it was never the empowered group that changed the dynamics of Jim Crow. It was the oppressed group.